The funeral reception was winding down. I was standing in the church fellowship hall, exhausted from grief and from hosting, when my sister Diane walked up to me with an envelope. She didn't hug me. She didn't ask how I was holding up. She simply handed me the envelope and told me I had been served. Inside was a lawsuit. Diane was contesting our mother's will, claiming Mom wasn't mentally competent when she made her final estate decisions. She was demanding that the will be thrown out and everything be split equally between us, 50-50. The same sister who hadn't visited Mom once in the 5 years I cared for her through Alzheimer's. The same sister who had missed birthdays and holidays and hospital stays. The same sister who couldn't be bothered to help change bedpans or manage medications or sit through the endless, heartbreaking decline. She handed me legal papers at our mother's funeral and walked away. My name is Susan, and I'm 67 years old. My sister Diane is 63. We grew up close, shared a bedroom, told each other secrets, navigated our parents' divorce together. We were best friends until our early 30s, when Diane moved to Arizona for her husband's job and slowly drifted away from the family. Our mother, Ruth, was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's at 72. I was 57 at the time, recently retired from teaching. Diane was 53 and deeply involved in her own life, her career in real estate, her husband's business, her social circle in Phoenix. When Mum got the diagnosis, I called Diane immediately. We talked about what this meant, what would need to happen. Mum was still living independently then, but we both knew that wouldn't last. She would need increasing support, eventually full-time care. I offered to take on the primary caregiver role. I lived 20 minutes from Mum. I was retired. My husband George was supportive and willing to help. Diane was relieved. She said she would help financially, would visit when she could, would support me however I needed. For the first year, that was mostly true. Diane sent money for Mum's expenses. She called regularly to check in. She visited twice. It wasn't hands-on help, but it was something. But as Mum's condition worsened, Diane's involvement decreased. The calls became less frequent. The visits stopped entirely. The financial help became sporadic and then stopped altogether. Diane always had reasons. Work was busy, her husband was dealing with health issues, money was tight. Meanwhile, Mum was declining rapidly. Within 2 years of diagnosis, she could no longer live alone. I moved her into my house. George and I converted our dining room into a bedroom for her. I became her full-time caregiver. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. Mum didn't know who I was half the time. She would wander at night, trying to leave the house. She became incontinent. She needed help with every basic function: bathing, dressing, eating. The woman who had raised me, who had been so sharp and capable, was disappearing piece by piece. I did it all. I changed her diapers. I held her when she cried from confusion. I stayed up all night when she couldn't sleep. I gave up my social life, my hobbies, my freedom. George was wonderful, but the primary responsibility fell on me. I called Diane during the worst moments, hoping for support or encouragement, or just someone who understood what I was going through. She was sympathetic, but distant. She never offered to come help, even for a week to give me a break. She never offered to take Mom for a month to share the burden. She simply listened and then changed the subject to her own life. After 3 years of home care, Mum needed more than I could provide. Her wandering had become dangerous. She had gotten outside twice and walked down the street in her nightgown. Her aggression during confused episodes had led to her accidentally hitting me several times. I was exhausted, burnt out, and facing serious health problems from the stress. I found an excellent memory care facility. It was expensive, $5,000 a month. Mum's social security and small pension covered about half of that. I paid the rest from my own retirement savings. George never complained, but I watched our nest egg shrinking month after month. I visited Mum every single day. I brought her favorite foods, played her favorite music, held her hand, even when she didn't know who I was. The staff told me I was the most devoted family member they had ever seen. Diane visited once in the 3 years Mum was in the facility. Once. She flew in for a long weekend, spent 2 hours at the care home, and then spent the rest of her trip shopping and sightseeing. During that visit, I asked Diane if she could help with the facility costs. I explained that I had already spent over $60,000 of my own money on Mum's care. She said she couldn't afford it, that her own finances were stretched thin. She suggested I look into Medicaid. I had looked into Medicaid. To qualify, we would have to prove Mum had almost no assets. That meant selling her house, the house our father had bought in 1965, the house we had grown up in, the house Mum loved. The house she had specifically told me, before the Alzheimer's got too bad, that she wanted to leave to me because I was the one taking care of her. I didn't want to sell Mum's house. It was the last connection to her independence, to the life she had lived before the disease took everything. And she had been so clear in her wishes. She wanted me to have it. So I paid for her care out of my own pocket and hoped there would be something left of my retirement when this was over. 4 years into Mum's Alzheimer's journey, she had what the doctors called a moment of clarity. These are rare with Alzheimer's patients, but they happen. Brief windows when the fog lifts and the person is fully present again. Mum had one of these moments during one of my daily visits. She looked at me and said my name, really said it, with recognition and love. She told me she knew what I had been doing for her, how hard it had been, how much I had sacrificed. She told me she loved me and was grateful. Then she asked about Diane. I told her Diane was busy, but sent her love. Mum saw through that lie immediately. She asked me directly if Diane had been helping, if she had visited. I couldn't lie anymore. I told her the truth. Mum cried. She said she was disappointed in Diane but not surprised. She said Diane had always been the one who ran from difficulty, who prioritized her own comfort over family obligations. She said it wasn't fair that I had carried this burden alone. Then she told me she had met with an estate attorney months earlier, before the Alzheimer's had progressed too far. She had updated her will. Everything, the house, the small savings account, her personal belongings, was left to me. She said Diane had made her choices, and this was the consequence. I didn't want to talk about inheritance while Mum was still alive, but she insisted. She made me promise that I wouldn't let Diane guilt me into sharing equally. She said I had earned this through 5 years of devoted care, through sacrificing my own money and health and happiness. She said this was fair. That moment of clarity lasted about 20 minutes. Then Mum slipped back into confusion and never fully emerged again. She died 4 months later, peacefully in her sleep at the care facility. I was with her. I had been there for hours, just holding her hand. Diane was not there. She didn't make it in time. Or more accurately, she didn't try very hard to make it in time. I planned the entire funeral. I wrote the obituary, chose the flowers, arranged the reception, contacted relatives, coordinated everything. Diane arrived the morning of the funeral. She cried beautifully during the service and accepted condolences as if she had been a devoted daughter. And then, at the reception, she served me with lawsuit papers. The papers claimed that Mum had not been mentally competent when she made her final will. They argued that leaving everything to one child, while disinheriting the other, was evidence of undue influence. They demanded that the will be thrown out and the estate be divided equally according to state intestacy laws. I was devastated, not just by the legal attack, but by the timing. Our mother had been dead for 5 hours, and Diane was already fighting me over money. I hired an attorney, a good one, specializing in estate litigation. He reviewed the situation and told me I had a strong case. Mum's will had been created when she was still relatively lucid, with a doctor's assessment confirming her competency. The attorney who drafted it had extensive notes about her clear intentions and sound reasoning. There were witnesses. Everything had been done properly. More importantly, my attorney said, I had 5 years of documented caregiving that clearly explained why Mum had made this decision. Phone records showing my daily check-ins with the care facility. Financial records showing the $60,000+ I had spent on her care. Testimony from care facility staff about my daily visits versus Diane's single visit in 3 years. The case would be expensive and emotionally draining, he warned, but he believed we would win. Diane's attorney contacted mine with a settlement offer. If I agreed to give Diane 40% of the estate, significantly less than half, he noted, as a compromise, she would drop the lawsuit. The offer included language suggesting that she was being generous by accepting less than her full share. I refused, not because I was greedy, but because it was the principle. Mum had made her wishes clear. She had specifically told me not to let Diane guilt me into sharing. Agreeing to settle would be dishonoring Mum's explicit instructions. The legal battle lasted 18 months. 18 months of depositions, document requests, court hearings, and mounting attorney fees. 18 months of not being able to properly grieve my mother because I was too busy defending her wishes. Diane's attorney painted me as a manipulative daughter who had isolated our mother and coerced her into disinheritance. They brought up every small family conflict from decades past, trying to create a narrative of me as controlling and Diane as victimized. My attorney countered with the facts. He presented the doctor's assessment of Mum's competency. He showed the timeline of when the will was created, early in Mum's diagnosis, when she was still clearly capable of making decisions. He brought in testimony from the estate attorney who had drafted the will, who testified that Mum had been absolutely clear about her intentions and her reasoning. Then he presented my evidence. 5 years of caregiving documented in exhaustive detail. The financial records showing my personal investment in Mum's care. Testimony from care facility staff about my devotion and Diane's absence. Phone records proving I had called Diane multiple times asking for help and been refused. He also presented something I hadn't known existed: letters. Mum had written letters to several friends during her early Alzheimer's years, before she lost the ability to write. In these letters, she talked about her disappointment in Diane's absence and her gratitude for my care. She explicitly mentioned planning to leave everything to me because it was the fair thing to do. Those letters were powerful evidence of Mum's sound mind and clear intentions. The judge ruled in my favor. He found that Mum had been fully competent when creating her will, that her reasoning was sound and well documented, and that there was no evidence of undue influence. He noted that a parent has the right to recognize unequal contributions by adult children through unequal inheritance distribution. He validated everything I had done, everything Mum had decided. But the victory felt hollow. I had won the legal battle, but lost my sister. Diane hasn't spoken to me since the ruling. We have no relationship anymore. She cut me off completely, as if I were the villain in this story. The house Mom left me sits empty now. I haven't been able to bring myself to sell it or move into it. It's too full of memories, both of the happy childhood Diane and I shared there, and of the painful years watching Mum decline. I keep it maintained, pay the taxes and utilities, but I don't know what to do with it. The money that was left, about $40,000 after all the care facility costs, sits in an account. It doesn't feel like an inheritance. It feels like compensation for 5 years of sacrifice, for $60,000 of my own money I spent on Mum's care, for the emotional and physical toll of caregiving that Diane never experienced. I don't regret honouring Mum's wishes, but I grieve the loss of my sister. Despite everything, despite her absence and selfishness, I loved her. She was my only sibling, my childhood companion. Now she's a stranger who sued me and lost. People have strong opinions about what I should have done. Some say I should have split the inheritance with Diane, regardless of Mum's wishes, that maintaining family harmony was more important than the money. Others say I did exactly right, that Diane had no right to benefit from a mother she abandoned. I think the truth is more complicated. Mum's wishes were clear, and I honoured them. But the cost of that choice was my relationship with my sister. I'm telling this story because inheritance disputes among siblings are incredibly common, especially when one child has been the primary caregiver. If you're facing a similar situation, know this: you have the right to honour your parents' wishes, even when other family members disagree. A will is a legal document expressing someone's final intentions. Courts take that seriously, but also know that legal victories don't heal emotional wounds. Winning in court doesn't restore broken relationships. Sometimes standing up for what's right means losing people you love. If you're the one doing the caregiving, document everything. Keep records of your time, your expenses, your sacrifice. Not because you're planning for a legal battle, but because it validates your experience. It proves you weren't imagining how hard it was, how much you gave. And if you're the sibling who has stepped back from caregiving, whether by choice or circumstance, understand that inheritance decisions reflect parental gratitude. They're not punishments, but recognitions of who showed up. Diane chose her path. She chose her comfort over her mother's needs. She chose absence over presence. Mum's will simply acknowledged that truth. I miss my sister. I hate that it ended this way. But I did what Mum asked me to do, and I protected her final wishes. That has to be enough.